The 1938 World Cup was a strange one. It would become known for political issues, brutal fouls, and goals galore, but also for the first glimpse of Brazil as a football superpower. It was a tournament that encountered issues from the very beginning. The problems began, as always, when deciding the hosts of the tournament. There were three main contenders: Argentina, France, and Germany. The FIFA Congress would convene in Berlin, Germany on the 13th of August 1936 to decide the host. After just one round of voting, France was selected. France got 19 out of the 23 votes. The decision to host the World Cup in Europe infuriated the teams from the Americas. They had been led to believe that the host would alternate between Europe and the Americas each World Cup. However, French FIFA President Jules Rimet convinced FIFA to select France. By selecting France, this would be the second World Cup in a row to be hosted in Europe. The anger over this decision led to Argentina, the United States, Mexico, Uruguay, and many others to pull out of the tournament. This was the second consecutive time Uruguay had pulled out, meaning they had not played a World Cup match since winning the 1930 World Cup final. A total of 37 teams would attempt to qualify for the 16-team tournament. For the first time, both the reigning champions and hosts automatically qualified, meaning both Italy and France were in respectively. Spain would also withdraw due to the Spanish Civil War. The remaining 34 teams were placed into 12 groups based on geography. Europe had 9 groups for which 11 teams would qualify. The Americas had just 2 groups where only 2 teams out of 9 would qualify. The last group was from Asia, where only 2 teams would compete for 1 place. From Europe, Austria, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Hungary, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Romania, Sweden, and Switzerland would qualify alongside France and Italy. From South America, just Brazil and Cuba qualified. Incredibly, neither of them had to kick a ball as the other teams in their group withdrew. A similar story happened in Asia, where the Dutch East Indies qualified automatically when Japan withdrew. Due to all this instability, only 21 teams of the 37 played a match to qualify for the World Cup. This was a World Cup that did not feel very global. It was essentially Europe and Brazil plus 2 smaller nations, and that's it. The tournament was due to start on the 16th of June 1938, but there was still time for one more curveball. On March 12, 1938, Nazi Germany invaded Austria and incorporated them into the German Reich. Austria would also withdraw from the World Cup as they were no longer an independent nation. What about England? Well, we know the drill by now. England refused to enter the tournament for the 3rd time in a row. Even when FIFA offered them a free place to replace Austria, they still rejected the idea. There are multiple reasons why. Firstly, England was still in a self-imposed exile from FIFA. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, it was a political decision. Europe in 1938 was in a fragile state. Spain was in a civil war, and the Nazi Germany war machine was ever expanding. England did not want to be perceived as weak, and they did not want to risk losing a football match on the global stage. Before moving on to the main tournament, I would appreciate a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I plan on making a World Cup related video like this every 2 weeks. Also, stay tuned until the end for the most notable stats from the tournament. The 1938 World Cup was a straight knockout competition. Germany, France, Italy, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Cuba, and Brazil were seeded in the draw. Sweden automatically qualified for the quarter-finals due to Austria withdrawing. The opening game of the tournament saw Germany versus the Swiss in Paris. The match saw the Swiss team adopt a precursor of the Catenaccio system. This is a tactical system focused with a strong emphasis on defense. Austrian coach Karl Rappan was the manager of the Swiss team. He assigned a sweeper to play in front of the goalkeeper with a strong backline of defenders which aimed to prevent goal-scoring opportunities. The tactics proved effective as they were able to frustrate the Germans as the game ended 1-1 and was forced into a replay. The replay was played 5 days later and proved to be a far higher scoring game. The Swiss played the same lineup, but Germany made a few changes. The Swiss were forced to play with 10 men as Paul Aebbe was injured early in the game. There were no subs in those days. Germany would take full advantage and race into a 2-0 lead. The Swiss managed to score just before half-time, but with the score 2-1 at half-time, the Germans were favourites. Remarkably, AB would return to the match in the second half, and the Swiss would stage a comeback to win the game 4-2 and proceed into the quarter-finals. The Germans were out in the first round. The next time Germany would go out in the first round would be the 2018 World Cup. Hungary faced the Dutch East Indies in Reims. It would prove to be a mismatch, as the Hungarians would race into a 4-0 lead by half-time. They would ease up in the second half, but would still romp home 6-0. Due to Austria pulling out the World Cup, Sweden was awarded a 3-0 win. The game was due to be played in Lyon. Cuba vs Romania was played in Toulouse. It was expected to be an easy win for Romania, as Cuba had only qualified because of all the teams that withdrew from South America. Amazingly, they would shock the Romanians. In an exciting 90 minutes, both teams would trade the lead as the score ended 2-2. The excitement continued in extra time as the game ended 3-3. There were no penalties in those days, so a replay was rescheduled. Incredibly, Cuba repeated the trick in the replay. Romania led 1-0 at half-time, but in the second half, Cuba scored twice to take the lead. Romania would have wave after wave of attacks, but Cuban goalkeeper Juan Ayra would put on a fantastic display as Cuba shocked Romania to win 2-1 and proceed to the quarter-finals. France vs Belgium was played in Colombes. The French would score after just 35 seconds, and they never looked back, winning the game comfortably 3-1. Italy would face Norway in Marseille. Italian coach Vittorio Pozzo was looking to become the first coach to win the World Cup twice. Pozzo would say about the game, "The critical moment was when our players raised their hands to give the fascist salute. I entered the stadium with our players, lined up military style, and stood on the right. At the salute, we predictably met with a solemn and deafening barrage of whistles, insults, and remarks." His teams would adopt the Metodo system. In an era where the 2-3-5 formation was standard, he realized that his midfield would need more support to stop opposition attacks. So, he brought back two of his forwards in front of the midfield into a 2-3-2-3 formation. This allowed his Italian sides to have more control in midfield. Despite the tactical advantage, Norway proved to be tough opposition. They hit the woodwork 3 times in the second half as the game was 1-1 after 90 minutes. Piola would score for Italy in extra time as they won 2-1. Brazil vs Poland was played in Strasbourg. It would go on to become one of the greatest games in the history of the World Cup, and probably the best match you have never heard of. Both teams played with a highly attacking 2-3-5 formation, and the match would be filled with goals. Brazil's star player Leonidas opened the scoring in the 18th minute. Just 5 minutes later, Poland would equalise from the penalty spot. Just 2 minutes later, Brazil would score again, and they added a third just before half-time. Brazil was 3-1 up at the break. Half-time would be the turning point. Rain started to pour, which made things more difficult for Brazil on the now slippery surface. Wilimowski for Poland would score in the 53rd and 59th minute to level the score. The rain would stop at this point, which helped boost Brazil, who would then make it 4-3 in the 71st minute, and looked like they were going to hold on for the win. But in the 89th minute, Wilimowski would complete his hat-trick. It was 4-4 going into extra time. Leonidas would score 2 more goals in the 93rd and 104th minute to complete his hat-trick and make it 6-4 to Brazil. The 93rd minute goal was controversial, as he did not have his boot on when taking the shot. But due to the terribly muddy conditions and black socks Brazil wore, it went unnoticed by the ref. Poland and Wilimowski were not done. He would score his 4th goal of the match in the 118th minute. During the last few minutes, Brazil held on desperately. Poland would hit the bar, but the game would end an incredible 6-5 to Brazil. The Czechs would face the Netherlands in Le Havre. The Czechs would dominate the ball but did not create many chances. The score was 0-0 after 90 minutes. The Dutch stubborn defence would be breached in the 93rd minute of extra time, and the floodgates would open as they lost 3-0. In the first quarter-final, Hungary faced the Swiss in Lille. In a tough and competitive affair, Hungary would win the game 2-0. They sealed the game in the 89th minute. Swiss manager Karl Rappan resigned after the game. Sweden faced Cuba in Antibes. Cuba's Cinderella story would end in a nightmare. Sweden would inflict a heavy 8-0 defeat. Reigning champions Italy faced hosts France in Colombes. This was considered one of the heavyweight clashes of the World Cup. Italy wore all black to highlight their fascism despite facing protests in France. Italy had a fast start, scoring after 9 minutes, but France promptly equalised a minute later. France dominated possession in the second half, but the Italian counter-attack proved lethal as Silvio Piola scored twice to lead Italy to a 3-1 win. When you hear the Battle of Bordeaux, you probably think it's referring to World War II. But no, it is referring to Brazil versus Czechoslovakia in Bordeaux, which would go down as one of the most brutal games in World Cup history. The match would have a series of vicious fouls as Hungarian referee Paul von Hertzger took a lax approach during the game. The game would see 3 red cards as Brazil went down to 9 men and the Czech down to 10. 2 Czech players would also suffer a broken right arm and leg. Planikar, the Czech keeper, would bravely play on with the broken arm. Multiple Brazilian players, including starman Leonidas, would also leave the game due to injury. The game would end 1-1 and a replay was scheduled. Due to the brutality of the first game, many changes had to be made for both teams. Brazil made 9 and the Czechs made 5. The Czechs would take the lead, but Brazil would turn it around to win 2-1. The first semi-final between Hungary and Sweden was played in Paris. The Swedes would score after just 35 seconds. But this would be their high point as Hungary would dominate the rest of the game to crush Sweden 5-1. The second semi-final saw a highly anticipated match between Italy and Brazil in Marseille. It was the defensive and strategic Italy versus the free-flowing attack of Brazil. Leonidas, the talisman for Brazil, was forced to miss the game due to injury from the Battle of Bordeaux. Italy started the game better as they were able to create chances on the break in the first half. But despite this, the half ended scoreless. In the second half, Italy continued their strong play as they took a 2-0 lead by the 60th minute. Brazil would launch countless attacks but would not be able to break the Italian defence until the 87th minute. More attacks would follow, but Italy held on to reach their second World Cup final in a row. In the now traditional third-place playoff, Brazil faced Sweden in Bordeaux. Sweden started strong and raced into a 2-0 lead by the 38th minute. Brazil looked lackluster, but managed to get a goal before half-time. In the second half, Brazil dominated, and the returning Leonidas scored twice as Brazil won 4-2 to secure third place. The final between Italy and Hungary was played in Paris on the 19th of June 1938. It would prove to be a highly entertaining encounter. Italy started quickly and took the lead after just 6 minutes through Gino Colausi. Pal Titkos equalised within 2 minutes. However, after just 16 minutes, Silvio Piola would give Italy the lead. Colausi would score again to give Italy a 3-1 lead at half-time. Hungary would relentlessly attack in the second half and were rewarded with a goal in the 70th minute. But with 8 minutes to go, Piola would score for Italy to secure a 4-2 win. Italy were the World Cup champions again. Notable stats from the tournament include Italy becoming the first team to both regain the World Cup, but also win it on foreign soil. Italian manager Vittorio Pozzo remains the only manager to win the World Cup twice as manager. Leonidas won the Golden Boot with 7 goals in just 4 games. 84 goals were scored in just 18 games at an average of 4.67 per match. Hungary were top scorers with 15 goals in just 4 games at an average of 3.75 per match. Well, there you have it. That was the story of the 1938 World Cup, a tournament that would be remembered for political issues, brutal matches, and high-scoring classic matches. But perhaps most importantly for Italy, proving their team was the dominant side of the 1930s. My next video will be on the 1950 World Cup, so please do like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.